But what happened to Aziz?
He got murdered in 85. He took on a case that everyone told him not to. He was a collaborator for the Israelis. And he threatened to kill my grandfather if he didn't drop the case. And my grandfather was not going to drop the case. So one time he came back from work and he got stabbed in his driveway, getting out of his car. So yeah, it was a rough period. Do you remember my mother going to Ramallah, like just without any notice? Like we just all of a sudden woke up and like my mom was gone, and then we kind of heard about what happened. It's something that's really tough to get over. I think the whole family like never really recovered from that.
And that's just one story, and that's happened to so many people there.
Oh my God, yeah. And after 67, he made a proposal for a two-state solution and made an argument for the Israeli government to say that, you know, because now they're taking on like, you know, 2 million Palestinians, and it's like that's a liability. Let's like set up a Palestinian state and we can live side by side in peace. He tried to do that, and that's when they told him like, well, Israel's an empire now. We don't have to.
Right.
We have to negotiate. I remember talking with my mom, and she tells me like he had such a tragic life because he really like tried to do the right thing. He kind of he felt like it was their fault. Like that generation was that the burden of losing Palestine was on them. Like he almost blamed himself for that. And they told him, don't get into politics. He never lost the case. He was a brilliant lawyer. I mean, he was meticulous in his preparation and also how he presented himself in court. You look at the plight of the Palestinians. I mean, I'm like two families, so my dad, my mom's, and I know what they went through and how tragic it was. Imagine like the rest of the population, like what you know, just so many tragedies.
That's Nadeem Srouji, my guest for this episode of Palestinian Stories. I'm Tim Hartman, your host, and Nadeem was talking about his maternal grandfather, Aziz Shehadeh. Aziz was a lawyer who had worked to propose a two-state solution to the Israeli government after the 1967 war in an effort towards peace. That was refused, but Aziz continued his legal resistance to the occupation until he was tragically murdered by a collaborator in 1985. We're going to be talking about that story during this episode, but it's also been chronicled by Aziz's son, Nadeem's uncle, the author Raja Shehadeh, in several books, and one I would highly recommend came out just a couple of years ago called We Could Have Been Friends, My Father and I. I'm excited to talk to Nadeem. His family has been family to me, and their history mirrors the universal Palestinian experience. It's often untold. It's marked by displacement and resilience, trauma, tragedy. His mother's family comes from Jaffa and Ramallah. His father from West Jerusalem, where Nadeem was born. And like so many Palestinians, the violence of colonialism is prominent throughout the narrative. The world has long known about the history of the Israeli occupation and what it's meant to the Palestinians. But I think many in the West, since October 7, 2023, are starting to wake up to the fact that the events of that day did not start on October the 7th. Nadeem and I were roommates in Amman, Jordan from 2013 to 2017. I recently returned to live in Amman. Nadeem is now in Los Angeles. He's both an entrepreneur and an actor. And we started our conversation by talking about current events, specifically what's happening in Gaza.
Because I think with the Iran war, everyone was watching it. Now that the ceasefire happened, people are kind of forgetting, and people forgot what's happening in Gaza because the genocide is still continuing.
Right. And it's worse than ever.
It is worse than ever, but like you don't hear about it as much when like first started. And that's scary.
I know. And talking to the people I know on the ground there, the price of food is just, if they can find anything, like a bag of flour recently I heard is now $700 US, where it used to be, I think, $5 to $7 to buy the same bag. So if you send someone, we had some money that was donated through various sources. We've been running a GoFundMe. To send them $1,500 might feed them for maybe a week and a half. God. And that's all, you know, what are you supposed to do? And that's even if they can find it or if you can get the money to them. Because
if you don't get shot while they're trying to get it also.
And if the people that you buy it from, the money changers, they are also targets because, you know, the Israelis know who they are. So they tack on an extra 30% commission on top of whatever you send them because it's basically hazard pay. You know, they have to do it.
So it's a black market for getting basic necessities, for getting bread or flour. It's insane. Food, like the basic right of every human being.
It's every single area of life that you can think of, they make it impossible to deal with. But anyway, I wanted to talk about, because this is obviously not something that started on October 7th. More and more people are becoming aware. And I think most of the world outside of America is pretty much up on what's happening with the Palestinians. You get that impression. But you hear the cat in the background there? That's EQ. He agrees with this.
Good.
Yeah, exactly. But no, he's Kafia Cat. Have you seen Kafia Cat in the stores around here? Like the store actually that originated that is in Jabal Aman here.
I have not seen it, but send me pictures,
No,
please.
I will. I will.
Yeah.
He's a cute little black cat. But this obviously has been going on since the founding of the state of Israel, and your family was directly affected by everything. I mean, you were born in Jerusalem,
Right.
so
Yes.
I wanted to bring you on to have you tell a little bit about your history and about both sides of the family. So you were born in Jerusalem, and it's been hard for you to get back. When was the last time you were actually in Palestine?
Oof, gosh, I want to say it was 97 or 98. That's how long it's been. But because I was born in Jerusalem, I have what they call a Jerusalem ID. It's kind of like a green card. So you
Mhm.
have to go back every 3 years. Otherwise, they take it away from me. And since I started college, I couldn't go back. So now it's been more than 3 years. I don't know what will happen if I go, but it's not going to be easy.
I mean, would you try to go back? Do you think it's worth it?
It's a good question. And I want to go back because that's where I'm from.
Of
Uh,
course.
since my grandmother died, like my mother said, like she doesn't feel like we have a reason to go back, even though I have uncles and cousins there.
Mhm.
So I could go back, but I don't know what will happen because you know how it is. I mean,
Yeah.
anyone that's Jewish can get the birthright, and they can basically go there, they're all paid, and also if they want to get subsidized, they'll get a home in probably the occupied West Bank and have no problem going there. And there's people that have never been to that land. I was born there, and because I haven't been back every 3 years, they'll take it away from me. So I don't know what will happen now if I go back, but it's not going to be easy.
Now, you were your mother's side of the family. Tell me a little bit about that history. What happened with them?
Yeah, so there's a lot of books about that. That's a good thing.
Hmm.
And my uncle's a writer, as you know. And the
Right.
good thing about it is that he wrote a lot about the history of what happened from the perspective of my grandparents. Because my grandparents' generation are the ones that went through the wars. So when 48 happened, they were living in Jaffa. They're originally from Ramallah, but it's like Ramallah is a summer house, and they go during the winter time to Jaffa. So they had kind of both two residences.
So even before
And
48, they had both residences.
yeah,
Is that
before,
right?
of course.
Okay.
And then when the partition happened, the UN partition in 47,
Right.
Jaffa was supposed to be part of the Arab state, the Palestinian state. So they
Mhm.
never expected that this was gonna, you know, be taken from them.
Right.
So
Yeah.
when the fighting started and the Zionist gangs or militia, like the three, which I keep forgetting the last one. The
What's the
Haganah, Irgun, and then what's the third one?
the Stern Gang? Is the other one?
Yeah, that's right. So they were like they were committing massacres at different towns, and they're spreading the words. People were afraid. They would go to the towns and they basically block off every exit except one, and they'll tell people to leave if they want to live, and they'll shoot some people just to kind of scare them away. So when that happened in Jaffa, my grandparents left. I had a great grandparent, a great grandmother. Actually, she's a half great grandmother, and she had a bullet in her arm. I remember. So the day she died, she lived to like 95 or something.
Wow.
Yeah, that side of the family, they lived for a while. But I remember like she had a bullet. I could see the bullet lodged in from 48, from when they were kicked out.
Which city is Jaffa then now for people who
It's
don't know?
Tel Aviv, basically.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. From that side of the family, all went to Ramallah first.
Yeah, because they had a house in Ramallah too, and they
Right.
went there. But everyone there expected to be back in a couple of weeks. That's what they told them. It's like, okay, go for your own safety. As soon as the fighting's over, you'll come back. So no one expected to lose everything. So no one really took a lot of stuff with them. So they lost
Mhm.
everything.
Now, just to set up some of the dynamics too, because in that land, everyone was living together before with no issues. So Jaffa itself didn't they have an Arab quarter and a Jewish quarter previous to 48? Or what was the divide of the
I
city?
think so. I mean, most of them there were Jews there. They were like very very small percentage, but I
Right.
mean, my grandparents used to tell me they had like Jewish neighbors and they knew like Jewish friends, and they never had an issue. They told me only when the European Zionists came, that's when the problem started because they had a mission to colonize the land, to ethnically cleanse it, so they can start. Because otherwise, they're such a minority, they couldn't start you know, a Jewish state.
Yeah, it was a demographic issue. And up to this day too, that's.
Yeah, so they had to ethnically cleanse most of the land, and
Right.
but for them it was, you know, the population were not allowed to carry any arms. My father told me, 'cause he grew up in Jerusalem, and he was 8 years old when 48 happened. So
Mhm.
he told me that it was death penalty to any Arab that had any weapon, even like a dagger.
A death
And
penalty. Oh wow.
yeah, so when the militia came, the Zionist militia came, they were basically fighting against it, and a population without any arms.
That's interesting that your family in Jaffa you're talking about, to back up to that, that's your mother's side of the family. But they
Right.
had Jewish friends that they would probably have dinners with and hang out with and things like that. Why do you think? Because it's obvious that they were scared of the Arab population and they thought that the Arab population would do something to them. This was prior, though, to even the Holocaust in World War II. So why do you think the fear was there? Do you get any indication from talking to relatives why they thought they were so afraid of
I
everything?
don't think, I think that was part of the narrative that they used
Okay.
to justify what they did. I don't think anyone had any issues. The issues was when the European Jews came and they were basically forcing people out, then it
Mhm.
became a war.
Right.
And they wanted to establish the state of Israel, and no Arabs were allowed in the state.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
the only one that happened was Nazareth, which we probably know the story. It was it was a Canadian captain, and he saw how many Arabs were there, and he's like, I'm not gonna massacre all these people.
Mhm.
And that's when Ben Gurion went, and he looked around and he said, why are there so many Arabs there? And it was too late, so they just kept them there. The propaganda is that they chose to stay. Like, we told the Arabs you could stay, but they all left except like those ones. But
I know.
no one wanted to leave. No one wanted to leave their land. Look at what's happening now in Gaza. No one is leaving. It's like it is the worst situation. But
Yeah.
that's how much loyalty people have to the land.
It's
It's almost a death sentence to go to Gaza as anyone, like as a journalist, as a doctor. I mean, they kill anyone. They don't have any
yeah, of
any
course. No, they don't
humanity.
care.
They don't care.
They don't care because they can get away with it.
I'm an eternal optimist. I think you are as well. So
Absolutely.
I have to believe that things will change, and I have to believe they will change in my lifetime. That's
Karma has a way of switching things around, and I hope it changes in our lifetime, but I think it will change at some point, whether it's our lifetime or the future. I think
right.
it's on that
No, well,
trajectory.
it has to. It
Yeah.
has to. In like science, like the environment has to reach an equilibrium. And
Correct.
the state of Israel is not in equilibrium because everything's
Mhm.
by force. Like
Right.
the reason why it exists is by force. The reason why they control the Palestinian population is by force. Everything's by force. It's against the natural flow of things.
No, and you study political science or historical science, like you're talking about. There's writers from the past, like even the Muslim writer Ibn Khaldun talked about that, the cycle of empire, and how
Right.
at the end of empire they have to do everything by force to make their position stable, and it's unsustainable. You can't do that. At some point, they will fall.
Right. And
So,
it gets really, really bad right before. Because if you look at apartheid South Africa, the last years of the apartheid, it was really, really brutal and violent.
mhm.
It's not
Yes.
exactly the same thing. Even like Black South Africans said, it wasn't as bad as what the Palestinians are going through.
No, it's absolutely horrific. And this is a perfect segue into what your uncle's work was about too. You're talking about your uncle, the writer Raja Shahada. He co-founded Al-Haq, the
That's right.
organization, 1979, along with Jonathan Kutab, and
Mhm.
they document the torture in Palestinian prisons. And you were mentioning the apartheid in South Africa. It's nothing like this. Like what they do
No.
to prisoners, it's absolutely mind-boggling. It's sick, horrific stuff. And the only reason the West even accepts what Israel's doing is because it's a racist thing, obviously, but and they perceive them as some sort of first world thing. But like if you look in detail what they're doing in the prisons, I mean, most people wouldn't even be able to read it. It's
Oh yeah,
just it's just unbelievable the stuff they
you won't
come
be
up
able to
with.
sleep at night just
Yeah,
reading about like a few cases of what they do, and it's still doing it, and it's getting worse.
yeah.
You know,
So
I don't want to. I was going to mention some things, but let's keep this
no, I mean
slightly.
it's just the worst things that humanity can come up with, and then multiply it by 1,000. It's like, how do you even devise these things? Sit around and think about it. Like Itamar Ben-Gvir and people like that. It's just they're the most evil people you can imagine. They're sadists. They're
They
absolutely
don't
terrible people.
see Arabs, Palestinians as human beings. That's it.
Right.
Because how can you do that something like that to another human being? I mean, that doesn't make and it defies all logic. Like you're not a human being if you do something like that to another human being. It doesn't make any sense.
Even to an animal, I couldn't
Yeah,
imagine doing stuff like
and
that.
any living thing. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
There's no way. So your uncle Raja Shahada, talk about like he's an author. So tell me about some of the how did he progress from Al-Haq to writing? Because he was a lawyer originally, right?
That's right. I mean, he's still a lawyer, but he thought. I mean, initially he wanted to expose all the illegal activities that the state was doing.
Mhm.
Because I think in the last book, if you read it, it could have been Friends.
Yes.
He talked about how like when after 67, he started seeing like how like he saw the plans of how Israel was going to divide up the West Bank with the roads so they can set up settlements. And it's illegal under international law
Of course it
just
is.
to change the demographic or the just the structure of a land you occupy. You're supposed to protect. That's a obligation that you have. So he was always thinking that exposing the human rights violation, exposing the torture, exposing these things was going to drive change. And he was involved in the Oslo Accords as well. And he was kind of optimistic a bit that he's going to be able to drive change through law.
Mhm.
But then after I think the Oslo Accord was like the straw that broke the camel's back for him, where he saw that nothing was going to change because it was all rigged.
Yeah.
They weren't playing. They're playing with a loaded dice in favor of, Israel, the U.S. support, all that. So after that, he decided to. That's what he told me. He's like, I'm going to express myself through writing, and that's how I'm going to be able to reach more people, tell the story of the Palestinians, and be able to, I guess, unload emotionally.
Yeah. Well,
Because I don't understand how they do it living there. I mean, I go there and I just feel so much like just negative, and heartache. And imagine living there every day.
and having to go through checkpoints and soldiers can enter your house without any notice and no need for a warrant and take it over and there's no repercussions. And
Yeah, it happened to my other uncle, Samar. They actually went into his home and took it over one time.
this is your mother's brother you're talking about too, Rajas.
Yeah, the other one, not the
Yeah.
right, the other.
Yeah.
Exactly. Listen to all. So that it happened to him in Ramallah.
What happened? What was it? How long ago was that?
It was a while back because his kids were like kids. Like not now they're they graduate from college or young adults, but like back when it happened they were young. So can you imagine like you're a father trying to protect your family, and soldiers come in and they're like, hey, we got to take over you. They put him in one room and they stayed in the house for I forget it was a day or 2 days because they were staking out some other place or something like that, and you can't do anything.
It happens all the time.
And that's the worst thing. Like as a father, as a head of a household, like you want to protect your family, and you can't do that when you don't have the same rights as the other people in the same land.
So some of your family on your mother's side went to Ramallah and some stayed there, and then others went to Amman, like your mother herself went to Amman.
My mother and her sister both went to Amman when they got married because they married Palestinians that were, I guess, from 48.
Right. Okay.
So like my dad's family lost their home. They were in West Jerusalem and they lost their home in 48. So they moved to Jordan.
Yeah.
And then when my parents got married, my mom moved to Amman because of that. But we were always going back and forth because her loyalty was obviously, and I can see that her loyalty was in Palestine and Ramallah.
Well, I think it's still as close as she can get to this region because you'd mentioned the last time I saw you in LA, which was like about a year and a half ago, that you had offered for them to move to the States and they still wanted to stay in Jordan because it's probably closer because it's closer to Palestine, I would imagine. But they have friends here too, I'm sure. But still, like the connection to this region would be part of it, I'm sure.
We have more family here, unfortunately,
Yeah, right. Yeah, you do now.
than we do back home. Even in Jordan, like there's no one left in Jordan. We have more family here than we actually have even in Palestine anymore because
Yeah.
most of my dad's family is in between the Bay Area and Southern California.
But your mother's side of the family too. Your grandfather Aziz, we were talking about Raja, and the last book one of the last books he wrote. It wasn't the last book he wrote, but we could have been friends, my father and I. He was talking about his relationship with Aziz, and Aziz had seen after 67 clearly, or at least Raja was explaining in that book what was going to happen. He basically predicted what's happening now, back in 67, and he too felt that, or he continued to fight things through the courts anyway. I think he was getting more disillusioned as life went on about the effectiveness of that. But what happened to him then? Because it was tragic. And I know you hadn't even told me until we knew each other for about 10 years. But what happened to Aziz?
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking with my mom, and she tells me like he had such a tragic life because he really like tried to do the right thing. He kind of almost he felt like it was their fault, like that generation was that the burden of losing Palestine was on them, kind of thing. Like he almost blamed himself for that,
Yeah.
But he always fought, and they told him don't get into politics, and he he like I said, he never lost a case. He was a brilliant lawyer. I mean, he was meticulous in his preparation and and also how he presented himself in court. So
Right.
he was the first one to actually, the only one to actually win a case to get the money back after the establishment of the Jewish state. Because what happened, most people in their bank accounts were frozen and seized by the new Israeli state.
Yeah.
And the banks wouldn't do it because they're like, well, we have to listen to the state. It's now Israel. Israel says no, so we can't do anything about it. And he actually sued, I think Barclays, I think that was the bank, and won.
So
And
he got money back for more than this was for a bunch of people. It's like a class
well, he
action.
did it for one lady,
Okay.
and it's in the book. But he did it for one lady, and then he got exiled.
Oh, to where?
I think it was Italy somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thanks he got.
Right. But when you said he never fought with weapons, did he? He was only in
No,
the
no, no,
course.
no.
Yeah, he
He
was.
fought like
Just to be
for the
clear,
right.
he was a nonviolent guy. He never fought
That's
with
right.
weapons. Yeah.
No, 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 no. My other grandfather from my dad's side, he fought.
But I mean, everybody has a right to resist too. Of course, what was
That's
going
right.
on?
That's right.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah, he kept like he kept trying even after 67. He made a proposal for a two-state solution and made an argument for the Israeli government to say that, because now they're taking on like, 2 million Palestinians, and it's like that's a liability. Let's like set up a Palestinian state and we can live side by side in peace. He tried to do that, and that's when they told him like, well, Israel's an empire now. We don't have to.
right.
We have to negotiate.
And then that unfortunately led to his tragic end in
Yeah. And he got
1985.
murdered in 85.
Yeah.
Um, he took on a case that everyone told him not to. He was a collaborator for the Israelis, and he threatened to kill my grandfather.
Yeah.
So if he didn't drop the case, and my grandfather was not going to drop the case, so one time he came back from work and he got stabbed in his driveway, getting out of his car. So yeah, it was a rough period.
And that was a land case, or what kind of case was that?
I think it was a land case. I'm not 100% sure.
But where were you at that time when you heard about it?
I was in Amman, and I just remember my mother going to Ramallah like just without any notice. Like we just all of a sudden woke up and like my mom was gone,
Uh,
and then we kind of heard about what happened. So
and your
yeah,
brother,
it's something that's really tough to get over. I think the whole family like never really recovered from that.
of course. Yeah. And that's just one story, and that's happened to so many people there.
Oh my God, yeah.
I
That's
think
why like you look at the plight of the Palestinians. I mean, I'm like two families, so my dad, my mom's, and
Mm,
and I know what they went through and how tragic it was, and how some people don't recover from it. Some people like end up being refugees for the rest of their lives, begging and living off of aid and stuff.
yeah.
And imagine like the rest of the population, like what just so many tragedies. That's why like we all have to be active. Like I know there's repercussions. Like I lost my job because I'm very active about this, but you know what? We have to be. Like if I'm not going to do it, then who will? I'm Palestinian, and you see people that are like, you know, Latin, Hispanic, Asians, all from all kinds, black, everything. So I'm
Mhm.
like, I have to be I have to be the head of the spear if I can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you being Palestinian, but yeah, I too was raised Christian Zionist. So once I found out what was actually going on by reading, it was Noam Chomsky I read first, and then I actually read Edward Said after that. And you're talking about Palestinians being exiled. He's a great author to read about the
Mm.
psychology of that and what they go through, and how never feeling at home and that sort of thing. But
Right.
yeah, once my eyes were open to all of that, I too realized I can't stay silent precisely because that element in the United States, particularly the Christian Zionists and the right, are more than anything what keeps it going.
That's
Because
true.
if they didn't have that support in the States, I think this could have been, you never know, given the interest the U.S. has in the region, but it might have been ended sooner. I mean,
Yeah, no,
it
absolutely.
certainly would have been weakened. That's for sure. Um,
And it was manipulated. I mean, nothing happened by chance. Like they did a lot of those things, coming up with the whole premise of, the Bible verse that says that if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed, and if you curse it, you'll be cursed. That's not really how it is written, and that's in Genesis. That's not really how it's written and how it means. But they actually wrote a book about it,
You're right.
and then they paid a lot of like priests to teach that
Mhm.
in the U.S. and start that kind of movement. That's why like all the evangelicals that born against, they passionately, like, without question, support Israel.
Well, the Bible is called the particular translation is called the Schofield Bible, and
Mm.
that was the one that put all that language in there, and it's in the commentary that they
Right,
talk
right,
about
right,
this.
right.
And I know because my I grew up with my father having like 10 copies of that in our house, and then the author's like John,
I am sorry for your difficult childhood. I hope you have some good
man.
therapy to get
No,
over it.
listen, I'm still working on it. But you had your own trauma growing up. I mean, you saw it directly, but that was my trauma, is being lied to. And then you realize lies are also trauma when you get woken up to that and you realize your entire belief system is just a
Yeah.
fabrication, you know,
But at least you got over it, because a lot of people, they just take what they've been taught when they were young, and they accept it as the absolute truth and don't question anything.
and go through their entire lives like that. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a rather
Yeah.
freeing feeling if you can get there, but it's definitely still some lingering trauma. But I want to talk about your dad's side of the family too. So tell me about his history.
So yeah, my dad not as documented, because I don't think we have any writers that documented a lot of these things. And then the problem with when you get uprooted from your homes, like a lot of the stuff, a lot of the continuity, or you know, the history is lost as well. So
Mhm.
what I know is what I heard from my dad and my grandparents. But my grandfather was living in West Jerusalem. There's like a very Christian neighborhood there. So I know a lot of people from there. And that was
Right.
taken over by Israel in 48. So they were kicked out in 48. Most of them end up in Jordan and then end up in the US. So he married the daughter of the French ambassador to Jerusalem.
Right. Okay.
And she was my grandfather was kind of like he's a tough guy.
Mhm.
He was a tough guy. My grandmother was more of like, she told him like you have to send all the kids to college. She wanted to kind of class up the family, as he would say, you know. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so he was committed to doing that because he loved her. And but then the war happened, and he was fighting. He's one of the last ones fighting. And like I mentioned that to you before, that in the book, that's a Zionist book about 48, which tells you a fake story if you want to read it. It
Right.
even says in there that there was I forget who he was. I think it was Derwish or something. There was a poet that was writing at the time, and this was towards the end of before it fell West Jerusalem. He's saying like, what is happening here? Like no one's left except the Srouji brothers, and that's my grandfather and his brother.
Oh,
So they were
interesting.
one of the last people fighting to kind of maintain it. But then it fell, and he shipped, like, he sent my dad and his brothers and my grandmother to Egypt. He had some family in Egypt, and then they came back to Jordan. But they were basically refugees.
Right.
And but he didn't want to accept. My dad told me he never accepted any aid or any help or any, like, donations. He was very stubborn. He said, once a beggar, always a beggar. So he never accepted anything, and they just but they started from scratch. My dad told me it's very tough, because they were like pretty. They were, I wouldn't say they were rich, but they're well off. But they didn't expect not to return, so they didn't take anything with it.
Right.
So they
Yeah.
they ended up in Jordan doing, just nothing. So they became like mechanics.
Yeah. Right.
And then they all immigrated to San Francisco, to the US. My dad's the only one that stayed
Yeah.
in Jordan. So
And so your dad stayed in Jordan, and he was the one that started the family company there,
right,
right?
right.
Did he get a loan from his grandfather, or was that from scratch too? How did he build that company?
No, no, they fought together. My grandfather and my dad didn't get along very well, so I think my dad paid him whatever he owed him, and he started from scratch. But what helped my father was he bought a lot of, like, paint thinner and paints and stuff like that before
Hmm.
the 73 war. And when that happened, there was a lot of, like, you know oil prices went up, so that means all of, like, the solvents, the paints, organic paints, like they went up as well, because they're all
Right.
derived from oil. And that's but he had a big stock and no one else had it. And that's why he's able to at least start a critical mass of funds to be able to start the company. So that's kind of how it started. Like that helped him out.
Where do you see things? I know we were talking earlier about you being an optimist. I mean, what's your thoughts on where this goes from here, where we're at right now?
I mean, it's hard to predict where it's going because we've never been in this situation before. But what I like to see is I'm seeing permanent change, you
Mhm.
know? Like I don't see things that, like when you see something like, okay, it's positive now, it might go back to the negative. I don't see anything going back. Like every step we take towards, you know, more of the truth being exposed, you can't put that back in.
I agree. I agree too. The problem is, I think things like this will probably get worse before they get better. It
And they are
concerns.
getting worse. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. Yeah.
definitely, I don't think anything has gotten better in the last 2 years.
Well, no, most definitely not. And right now it's at its peak too, which is concerning because in the news in the West anyway, it's buried. Over here, it's not. But yeah, people need to stay vigilant on this kind of thing. And it's good to see the ICE protests then in America too. I see that as even waking people up again to this because, like you said, it's all tied together. So things that are happening
Right.
there right now are keeping it forefront because everybody is seeing the connection, and America still hasn't examined its own past in regards to the genocide we did with the Native Americans. But that's all tied together too. If you study the patterns of that and how the Israelis, the Zionists, are treating the Palestinians, it's a very similar psychology and path. It's all the same throughout history. It's just
Yeah.
this one's just happening in our time.
This is something like I knew before, but no one talked about is how like Albert Einstein, he
Yes.
he was offered to be the president of Israel in like 52 or something like that. And he said
Mhm.
no because he saw that they are following the same blueprint as the Nazis. It's like a little too much. And he was very concerned. And he said also the whole concept of a Jewish state with borders and an army is
Right.
anti-Jewish
Yeah,
because
exactly.
the religion doesn't allow you to have it says you're going to be everywhere, like you're going to be throughout the land, and God is supposed to bring you back, not you by force,
Right.
to
Yeah.
go back to what the land of Israel was and claim it as your own. So
Yeah.
they've been trying to kind of whitewash the history and make it kind of sink in with, because their whole concept is that Zionism is Judaism, and if you're against Zionism, you're anti-Semitic and blah blah blah.
Get
Even
out of
though
here. I'm so
it is
tired of that
anti-Jewish.
anyways. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I
Zionism
know
is anti-Semitic. That's the issue.
there's Jewish factions in America that are adamantly against this because they call it a heresy. You are not to return. I mean, if you believe in Judaism and the theology, you're not to return before the Messiah comes back and
Right.
brings them back to the land. So it's an actual heresy to do it on your own. I don't know how you tie yourself to a state or a political ideology or a military. I've talked to Jewish friends about this that believe in that, and I'm like, why would you identify yourself, your personal identity, with what a military is doing? I've never been able to understand it. And the one guy said that I've talked to recently that he was personally offended by some of the friends talking about the military. Why are you personally offended? You never even lived in Israel. You never. How does that personally offend you? We're not talking about what the military, who the military is. We're talking about what they're doing. It has nothing to do with like you being
Right.
like. It's just such a brainwashing. I can't wrap my head around that because I've never experienced it. But
But now with social media, you have a disconnect.
yeah,
So the social media gives you like the truth on what's happening on the ground for the
unfiltered.
most part. Yeah, unfiltered. It is what it is,
Yeah,
And then media is basically what's allowed by the state of Israel, the Zionist lobby. So
yeah.
now you're seeing like the disconnects here, and you're seeing what the propaganda has been for the whole 77 years or more.
You talk about anti-Semitism. They always bring that up. I'm like, when do we get to talk about anti-Palestinianism? Are they allowed to suffer too? There's like only certain people allowed to suffer, and others or whatever.
No, but the main thing is it's very interesting because the true Semites are the Palestinians.
Of course, yeah,
People are seeing the truth, and that's the most important thing. Like the truth is what's going to change things, and the more countries sign up for that, like release themselves from the hold or the clause of the Zionist lobby, and then we start doing sanctions and boycotts and all these things. That's what's going to drive the change. That's what happened with South Africa as well.
and that will come because there's precedent for that with other countries.
It's
Like you
it's
said,
happening already, but it's
yeah,
not. I mean, once it reaches a critical mass, then that's when change will happen. And it's when the U.S. will start seeing Israel as more of a liability than like an asset or a partner or an ally. And the fact that half of the MAGA base is already like thinking that way,
Yeah.
that's a very positive sign.
Yeah, that makes me smile, actually. You know what Tucker Carlson is doing? I'm actually like applauding him, and I never thought I'd see the day. And then you
Hey,
said,
you and me both.
yeah,
Him and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm just like, wow, I'm agreeing and sharing their posts now.
and
What is happening?
he's calling out other people on the right for looking like idiots, like Ted Cruz. You know, it's like you don't even know the population of the country you're bombing, and
Yeah, I mean, he's a good
it's
interviewer. So
yeah, he
just like
is.
Pierce Morgan, for example, also.
Right, yeah.
He's a good interviewer. He has a lot of followers. So the fact that now he sees the light for the most part.
Well, he's doing it because he has to, because his audience now is majority, pro-Palestinian. So like he realizes if he doesn't, he's going to be canceled by that side. It's all just convenience for him and wherever he gets the money. But still, that tells you something about where things are heading. You know,
Yeah,
if that
because
persuades him to
that's
do it.
pretty mainstream. That's a pretty mainstream, kind of medium
Platform. Yeah.
a platform. And I think he also, if he's talking about like his show is like uncensored, Piers Morgan uncensored, he cannot shy away from the truth. Like if
Right.
people are saying things that are and like you can't argue with, like certain logic, he has to acknowledge it. Because if he keeps denying it, people are gonna stop taking him seriously.
Well, they just stop following him too. I mean,
Yeah, that's true. That's
his show
fine.
would
That
just yeah, his show
goes
would
hand
just
in hand.
decline. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
taking the time, man. Just want to get a little bit of the
Hey,
history, and that's the idea here to keep these stories recorded
I
because
appreciate that because that's how it gets lost and it's not as documented. Like
yeah,
we can't do a family tree like a lot of people can in the US, for example, or something.
it's like something I thought about. Do you have home documents of ownership and deeds and stuff, or were all those things left when people just left their houses?
Yeah, I think they were left. I don't remember having my dad having any of those
Yeah.
because they thought they're gonna come back. That's what they were told. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
right now we look back, we say, how did they not see it coming? But when you're like living,
What's new? You had no idea at that time.
yeah, and you're the majority, like you get a minority saying we're gonna take over everything. You're like, okay, that's not gonna happen.
And you also had the UN law that partitioned it to saying a state was going to be yours.
They
So you
thought
would
that
think,
was the worst case.
right. Yeah.
And here's another thing, by the way, because the Zionists keep talking about the partition, saying, "Oh, the Arabs didn't agree." Israel didn't agree either. The Zionists
No.
no, they didn't agree to it. They use it as a, oh, we want the UN wanted to give you a country, but you said no. But you
Right.
also said no. You didn't accept. You're gonna take as much as you want.
God, there's a pattern there.
Yeah.
Like every time they offer a truce agreement, too, everybody should know don't just look at the headlines. Read what the truce agreement is, because then when they go back and say, well, Hamas violated this, or Iran violated this, or Iran didn't agree to this, Hamas didn't, and we tried to get peace, look at the terms of the agreement and see what they actually offered. It's always something
Yeah.
they can't accept. It would have been the same thing back in 48, too.
The whole thing with Iran, like I don't see it. It's not over.
No, it's not over. That's also the
Israel is
pattern.
probably planning something to hit them again. I don't know.
100%. Like they've started it now. They realize that they've weakened certain elements like Hezbollah. That really weakened the Houthis at all. They realize like if they don't do it now, it's going to be never. So if they stop now and the whole thing gets stopped, they're never going to have a chance to do it again. It's definitely not over. That's in their pattern. I think we're
Plus, Netanyahu needs a war to stay in power and not go to jail. So that's another thing.
correct.
That's
Yeah.
why, like Trump tried to get him pardoned.
Yeah.
He dropped the charges, but like it's not up to Trump to do that.
Right. I know.
But no, no, I mean, no, like even when Trump told him to stop, they kept bombing. So Trump's pissed off at him because he
Yeah.
makes him look like a fool. And Trump does not like. He has a big ego. He doesn't like to look like an idiot. So
Well, like you said,
first time.
you got the libertarians and the elements that follow Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and people like that are against it now too. So he's got two sides of his base yelling in his ears. So you never know what
And,
can
and his
happen with
ego
it.
also. His
Yeah, too.
ego's good because Netanyahu's always messing with him. I heard that somewhere. It's saying that the end is near because the support for Israel is an aging baby boomer population that's not going to be around very much longer.
That's right.
The young, I mean, look at the young, and you look at what's happening. I'm following it, and this is the shift that's really exciting to me. First of all, Mamdani. I mean, New York is going to a Muslim who's pro-Palestinian.
I
mean, that's
know.
unheard of.
I was
mean,
just listening to.
he's a charming guy. I'll give you that. But I mean,
No,
come on.
yeah.
And a lot of the protests that I see in New York, like pro-Palestine protests, are like with Hasidic Jews.
Yeah,
You know,
I know.
like not casual Jews. Like they're like very religious because they know that this is wrong and this is against their religion and it's giving them a bad name.
You're
Which
right.
they're like, this is not what Judaism is about. And I agree with it. Judaism is a religion of peace.
Yeah.
And they made it into this like warmongering kind of, dominating occupation, killing. I mean, it's just
They make it political. Any
Yeah.
religion that you make too political is like that. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, doesn't matter. Well, man,
Yeah.
thanks for taking some time to tell about your history and your
Thanks
thoughts
for
on all
having me,
this.
man.
Yeah, of
It's always a
course.
pleasure. I've always, you know me, I always like to talk about these things because I feel like this is important for the whole world, not just for Palestine.
No, yeah, absolutely. And me too. Well, get over here to Amman, or I'll come to LA and we'll continue the
I
protest.
think we'll do both.
Yeah.
I'll try to swing by soon, and then you can come back to LA and
Yeah, perfect.
free Palestine together, man.
Free Palestine. That's
Let's
right.
go.